Salam Yesizbia, Laura Sanko here. I just finished up a great interview with Schrodinger Sport. I'm so thankful to them, and I can't wait for you guys to check it out.
Okay, first question. We're here after the last UFC tournament of 2024. What is your three most memorable moments from this year in the UFC?
Oh my gosh. I'm so bad at doing these off of the top of my head. They're very, very tough. But one of them that does come to mind, of course, is the Sphere. The Sphere was, in totality, an incredible moment for the UFC. And I think it's big for me because I am, of course, friends with the people who are producing the show. And if people understood how much work and dedication it went into and money into making that one pay-per-view, they would be absolutely astounded. So that's definitely one for me. You have to go with Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, the knockout. I don't know if we're ever going to have a better knockout in the history of the UFC. That one to me absolutely takes the cake. It's the best one in the history of the UFC, particularly considering how the fight was going leading up to it, who both of these guys are. They're both so individually violent. The BMF belt's on the line. It just doesn't get better than that. And then for another one, I mean, getting to shake Shavkat's hand was up there.
Yeah, of course. Let's proceed to Shavkat. You were at the arena during his fight against Ian Garry. How did you like it?
I mean, it was a nerve-wracking fight if you're a Shavkat fan, but anytime he steps in there, I'm always captivated by what he's going to do and how he's going to operate. And it's a funny thing because the fan base perception of what I like about Shavkat is kind of all over the place. Some people are completely misunderstanding the point. Some people understand where I'm coming from. Whatever, I don't care. I knew that would be a very tough fight for him. I did know that going in, and so I knew it wasn't going to be a walk in the park. Ian Garry is a tremendous fighter with I think, underrated skill set. I think sometimes people don't give him the credit that he fully deserves because maybe they don't like how he operates outside of the octagon, so they allow that to impact how they feel about his fighting. So I knew it was going to be a very, very hard fight. I wasn't expecting the fifth round to go the way that it did, but thank goodness Shavkat was able to expertly defend that rear naked choke and get another win. I think the fact that the injury was revealed, and I think too the fact that they were very familiar with each other made it a very difficult fight for both of them. So I think that's why it played out the way that it did. But yeah, good for Kazakhstan to bring home another win.
Well, we're in Kazakhstan almost had a heart attack during the fifth round.
Same.
Well, you saw Shavkat after the fight. There's only a short video segment online that was caught on camera when you met him near the stands or somewhere. What did you talk about with him?
I was there to interview him, so it wasn't like, a casual, friendly conversation. And obviously, I think what I was astounded by was how much other people have gotten on board with I don't want to call it a hype train because it's justified, just with his fandom. I had to kind of do my interview somewhat quickly because Dana White and his son, I believe it was, were waiting right next to me, right off camera, to get a picture with Shavkat. So that will tell you just how much he has captivated the UFC audience and the UFC ecosystem. I feel really connected to it because I was a fan of Shavkat before he even got to the UFC. That's what a lot of people don't realize. So yeah, it was really cool to see, and I've met him, I think, twice before. I've interviewed him a couple of times before as well. So it wasn't the first time that I met him, but it's the first time I met him after all of the hoopla about, me being such a big fan made its rounds, on the internet. So, and then we were able to do a shirt collaboration, or I did a shirt collaboration with Full Violence, who he works with. So yeah, it was a good moment. He's a quiet, reserved.
Humble guy.
A lot of you guys are not like us Americans. We're very in your face and gregarious, and like, I kind of have to remember, like, okay, this is, I can't just like run up and give him a big hug and tell him great job. That would be something I would do to fighters I know really well, and of course would be, I'm respectful of him and his culture and traditions. So it's just a little handshake.
You said that Dana White and his son were waiting for Shavkat after the interview. So did you spread this love from Shavkat to the rest of the UFC team, or Dana really loves him by himself?
I think Dana likes his fight results, but I would like to. I mean, I would like to think that maybe my comments. I don't know if it was a year or 2 years ago. The whole "he gives me chills" comment. I think that did help because it went very viral, and maybe more people saw that than would have. But the fact is that the way that he fights, and the fact that he wins fights, the way that he wins fights, he was going to get the fan base anyway. But maybe I helped, a little bit on the side.
Well, actually, talking about this segment, this chills segment, seems like many people in Kazakhstan didn't understand what you really mean by this phrase that Shavkat gives you chills. Please, can you explain that? Because people, trying to think about it more, trying to speculate.
Yeah.
Please clarify it for us.
So partly you have to understand the context of what show I'm on when I was making that comment. The morning weigh-in show is a very relaxed, funny show, which is why I think in one of the segments where I spoke in Kazakh, I'm in pajamas because it was like our Christmas show. And in America, one of the traditions is like we do Christmas pajamas. So on the show, we dressed in Christmas pajamas as like a funny thing. So part of it is the context of that show is it's very loose and casual and meant to be very funny and much more fun, and not nearly as like serious and buttoned up as I am when I'm on ESPN. So I was being definitely very playful when I said he gives me chills, and I realized I was being playful about it, but he does. And I meant it in the sense of like just the way that he operates in the middle of a fight, chaos, in the middle of violence. He's so, smooth and cool and calm that you can tell he's very comfortable in those chaotic situations. I think the fact that I wasn't familiar, well, and still largely am not familiar with his culture. He doesn't speak English. He doesn't even say much when he's speaking at all. So there's a mystery there as well. And then to have someone that far into their career with a 100% finish rate, there is an aura about that, right? I was speaking to like the aura that he has as a fighter, and I am as big of an MMA fan as you will ever find. I don't know if everybody knows that about me, but like I started training in 2006, so you do the math. This sport is very integral to who I am. So when I speak with passion about the fighters, as a female speaking about men, people love to jump to all sorts of conclusions. But it was not meant to be in a romantic sense, although I was sort of being a little bit like playful with it. I have a husband. I think he's married. I don't actually know. I've never asked him, but I'm pretty sure he's married. I'm married, so it was never meant to be that way, but I'm a huge fan.
I think our fans are trying to remind you that he has a wife every time on Instagram, probably.
They're actually trying to marry me off to him. I don't think many people know necessarily that he has a wife, but...
Well, in some places in our country is acceptable to have 2 or more wives.
Yes. So maybe they are suggesting that I become another one. Although I think my husband would probably have a problem with that. So we'll just leave it where it is.
Okay. Recently, you have released a T-shirt in the Kazakh style. Manager of Shavkat, Sayat Abdrakhmanov, said in an interview with our channel, it was your personal idea. How did it come about?
So Full Violence is the name of the company, the website, the Instagram handle that does these shirt releases for lots of different fighters and personalities in the MMA area. They worked with Charles Oliveira. They did one for the Fighting Nerds, and they actually approached me to say, we'd like to do a shirt with you. And this was quite a while ago. And then they kind of got busy doing releases with Alex Pereira, who is obviously much more famous than I am and is going to sell a lot more shirts. And then they circled back, hey, we're ready to do the shirt. And it just felt like they wanted, obviously, there to be some sort of tie-in with Shavkat, but out of respect, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't overdone in like a way that would be, it would just make fans speculate even more. But I wanted to acknowledge and almost thank the Kazakh fan base for embracing me and, supporting my love of their fighter. And it's caused me over the last year to like learn more about Kazakh culture, not that I'm even remotely an expert, about the history. I read up on, and I'm going to say her wrong. I'm going to say her name wrong. So I want you to teach me how to say her name. Is it Takhmaris? Tomaris.
Yes.
I think I heard a Middle Easterner pronounce it, and so I went with that. So it's Tamaris?
Tamaris, yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
I learned all about her, which, I mean, as a woman, I love that Kazakh culture has this amazing queen, as part of their history. Not just Kazakh culture, but all of the nomadic culture, of course. I went to a place in America that happened to have a falconing class. And so we don't have the eagle. It was a much smaller bird, but I learned about the art of falconing, and I have been an equestrian my entire life. So part of me is just like, these people love the same things that I do, and I want to learn more about them. So the shirt was meant to be a thank you to them. And then once they made the shirt, I did have the idea, like, I would never want a fan from Kazakhstan. I would never want to profit off of someone from Kazakhstan. I would rather thank them and give the money back. So we're in the process of figuring out what charity it will be, but Sayat's going to help me with that.
The Full Violence brand have given you preliminary sales numbers, and will be their second batch of these t-shirts?
They have not given me, I think that they're selling well, but I believe that the sale goes all the way through the end of the month. I'll have to check on that. I'm supposed to be getting mine in the mail pretty shortly. I had the one that I gave to Shavkat, but I think it might have been too small for him. I need to probably send him another one. And then when I'll probably post another picture and put the link up again. It's hard because, when I click on the comments and I click translate, thank goodness for translate on Instagram. A lot of people had the question about how to order it. And it was hard for me to make sure that I was explaining it, but there is a link in my bio, and hopefully people can go there and maybe use Google Translate to figure out how to do it. But yes, all of the money, the profit that I was supposed to make, as well as the profit that Full Violence was going to make, they have pledged that they will send all of their money as well. So everything, it's normally a 50-50 split, but every dollar earned from the shirt is going to go back to Kazakhstan.
Well, I think we, as the biggest media in Kazakhstan covering UFC, should also push this idea and push this story from ourselves.
Well, I would appreciate that, and I know that it's going to go to a good cause, and Sayat will help make sure that it's a reputable charity and that the money gets sent safely. So it'll be a happy ending to a fun adventure.
Talking about getting more deeply in the Kazakh culture, Sayat also said during the interview that you and Nina Drama are going to visit Kazakhstan. Do you have any approximately dates?
This is the first I'm hearing of this. I don't know if he was kidding, but listen, if that were to happen, absolutely. I do know that back in, I believe it was either 2021 or 2022. Don't quote me on this, but the UFC had plans to go to Kazakhstan for, I don't know if it was going to be pay-per-view or a fight night, but there were plans to have a show in Kazakhstan. And so if it's something that the UFC has already considered and said yes to, then I know that they will consider it and say yes to it in the near future, especially with Shavkat and all of the other Kazakh fighters as well that are coming up. And I've had the conversation with my boss that if we have a show in Kazakhstan, I will be on that show.
Right before the fight, you had a podcast where you said that you actually noticed Shavkat before his debut in UFC.
Yeah.
How was that actually? The familiar way is when YouTube giving you some recommendation to view, or maybe you purposefully Google him.
No, I'm trying to remember exactly when it would have been. It might have been that Google or my YouTube algorithm served me something. That I do think that's what it was, because he was in M1 and it was a long time ago. And I remember thinking, wow, this guy is amazing. And even when I'm not calling the fights, even when I'm just doing interviews backstage, I still almost prepare the exact same way, where I will research a fighter and watch film on them and go back through their fighting history. So I had watched a number of his fights in M1, and then some time had passed. And then when I saw that he was making his debut on Fight Island and I was covering those fights, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the guy that I saw before in M1. And I was right. And I refreshed myself and, saw his most recent fights, his championship fights in M1. And I was just so excited to see him, making the transition to the UFC. And then, of course, he did what I knew he would do and just started absolutely destroying guys left, right, and center. So I guess I felt like I wanted to speak about him a lot every time I had the opportunity, because I knew how special he was. And I also knew that fighters who don't speak English and fighters who are from countries that we as Americans are not all that familiar with don't always get the most attention, even when they're doing great things. And so I felt like I had the best kept secret that I wanted to tell everyone about every chance I got.
And did you know anything about Kazakhstan before you noticed Shavkat and before his debut?
No, I didn't. Okay. I mean, I knew where it was, and I knew that it was. I was familiar with like the beautiful steppe landscape and the eagle riders, and the only thing I knew about that area of the world. So I grew up riding horses, and this is it takes place in Mongolia, but it's obviously similar terrain. There is a horse race, the Mongolian, and I'm trying to remember what it's called, where you ride for like 24 hours straight and you switch horses over and over and over again. It's like a endurance ride. There's a documentary about it. And one of my former horse trainers was involved with it and did that ride. And I remember seeing her do it and just her talking about the culture and loving it over there. So it's not like I knew nothing, but, Borat didn't do anybody any favors in America. Terrible.
Oh, well, as well as in Kazakhstan. But by the way, yeah. I don't know if you know it, but Kazakhstan has the 9th territory in the world. We are top 10 in the world by territory.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. See, this is why I wanted to speak to you, because I learn something every time, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah. So, talking about Shavkat, have you been to all of his fights in UFC?
I think I have, actually. You know what? I was not there for his win against Jeff Neal, but I watched it. Yeah, that would be the only one, and that was nasty. That was great.
Did he or maybe Sayat or someone else gave you this wolf hat, Tymak?
So I asked for it. I had Sayat get it for me because I really wanted one. And so I know Danny Rubenstein, who is Sayat's business partner in Ruby Sports. And so I communicated with Danny at first, and I said, Danny, I have to, because I was such a huge fan. I was like, I have to get the hat so that when I'm on the weigh-in show, I can wear the hat and like get people's attention when I'm talking about Shavkat. So I asked for it, and Danny had Sayat get me one from Kazakhstan.
How did you come up with the idea to learn Kazakh words? You have a very good pronunciation,
Thank
although
you.
it's not easy.
It's not easy. You would laugh if you could see video of me somehow in my hotel room watching YouTube videos, pause, I try to say it, pause, I try to say it. And then as soon as I think I've gotten maybe okay at it, I will send a Word file to Sayat and say, how does this sound? Or I will send him an idea of like, this is kind of what I want to say. Can you say it for me in Kazakh very slowly? And I just play his file over and over and over again.
Она говорит, да, я, говорит, готовлюсь. И я, говорит, она даже учила казахский. Учила казахский и мне скидывала, как она говорила, как она практиковалась. И я на самом деле в шоке был, как она практически без акцента такая, говорит, «Салямет сизбе». Вот. Да, у меня даже голосовое сообщение есть, как она спрашивает, говорит, правильно я говорю или нет. И я удивился сам, как она четко произнесла. Давай я вот так вот поставлю.
Давай. Give it a shot. You have to tell me if this is any good, okay? Salam yetzizbe.
But I've watched, like the Salam yetzizbe was from, I learned to say that, which I realize is just hello. It's not very much. I learned that from a YouTube video I watched. I was trying to get I wanted to be able to at least have a very basic conversation, but I haven't quite gotten to that part yet. It is a very difficult language for American speakers. The Kazakh language is very back in the throat, and Germanic English is up here a lot. So it's hard for us to make the proper sounds and pronounce it correctly.
You said that you study the history of nomads, history of Kazakhstan. What fact surprises you the most about what you have acknowledged?
I think that the overall nomadic culture is really fascinating to me, to live a life where your home is not in the same place all the time. I mean, you go with the seasons and you go with the animals, and your life revolves around taking care of, your herd, whatever it may be. And is it called a yurt?
Yes.
Yeah, the yurt and the culture of everyone living in relatively small, I would call it a tent, but it's small spaces, I think builds community. I live on a ranch, so I have cattle, obviously very different than being a nomad, but I can appreciate the love of taking care of animals and how that is an everyday part of your life. You don't get a break when you have animals, whether it's snowing or windy or cold or hot. Your first priority is always to take care of your animals. And so, there's part of me that understands that, and I like that as well. I do realize that a lot of Kazakhstan lives in a city. It's not like I think all of you live in tents. I'm thinking, I'm speaking, of course, more about the more nomadic culture and the old culture of Kazakhstan. I realize that you also live, in big cities.
Yeah. Most of the country actually lives in big cities. Laura, tell us, please, how did you become a journalist? You started with Invicta, but I'm curious, whose idea was it? Who helped you? What was the most difficult for you at the start of your career after you finished with the fighter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was a fan, and then I started to train, and then I became a fighter. And I had 8 fights between my amateur and professional career, and I fought for Invicta. And then my husband and I got pregnant, which was kind of a surprise. And And then obviously that changes life's priorities. So I of course wasn't going to fight for a while. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to return to fighting or not after I had my son. Because I was an atom weight, and this was even at a time. So I got pregnant literally right around the time that Ronda Rousey made her entrance into the UFC. So we weren't really sure what was going to happen with women's divisions, if they were going to add more or if it wasn't going to work out and they were going to say no more women. So I was approached by the woman who started Invicta, and she said, while you're taking this break from fighting, why don't you try to be on TV and you can do some broadcast work for us? And I remember thinking, man, that's a cool idea, but I had no idea what I was doing. I've never spoken on camera before. I've never interviewed anybody before, but I knew fighting, and I knew fighting really, really well. So I thought, I can, I'll figure it out as I go, and I'll learn as I do it. And that's kind of how I went. It was definitely, if you go back and watch my Invicta broadcast work, it's not the best. I was learning a lot.
We're all starting from something. So
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah. And how did the UFC notice you? How they
what's
approached you?
Yeah, there are conflicting stories about. I've asked my boss the same question, and there are two different versions of the story. But basically, what happened was it was around the time when Ariel left the UFC. Ariel Helwani left the UFC. And Heidi Androl and Megan O'Leary were the two reporters, and Heidi Androl went on maternity leave, and they needed to, Megan couldn't do all, 43 shows or whatever it was at the time. So they needed someone to kind of fill in for Heidi while she was on maternity leave. And I think that because Invicta was on Fight Pass at the time, they saw my post-fight interviews, and some of them went viral for funny reasons. And I actually think that that's when they kind of saw, there's a woman who does in-cage post-fight interviews who used to be a fighter, and maybe we'll have her in for an audition. So it was when we were on Fox, and I went to Fox Studios and did an audition, and it was horrible. I did terrible.
And what happened next?
So it was really bad, but apparently not bad enough where they didn't call me. They auditioned me for an anchor role, which is like being the host of a desk show. So if you're familiar with Karen Bryant, she's been the best anchor we've ever had for ages and ages and ages. And they auditioned me for her role, which is a very different skill set. You have to be used to working with multiple cameras, where to look. You have to be used to controlling the flow of the conversation with your analysts. I had never done anything like that ever in my life. And I had never read from a teleprompter before, ever. And in the audition, they intentionally do things to mess you up, to see how you handle it when things go wrong. So they put the wrong script in the teleprompter on purpose to see what you will do. And I don't think I did very well. But they knew from seeing my work at Invicta, and they knew from my, I guess, conversations and just knowing my analysis and knowing the way that I talked about fights, that clearly I knew MMA very, very well and would be great as a reporter, just not as a host.
Right now, when your co-host making fun of your emotions or feelings for Shavkat on camera, on studios, does it somehow disrupt you or makes you shy or somehow shake your confidence on
No,
life?
I'm used to giving as good as I get from the guys. And that's part of being an analyst and a commentator now that I'm on that side of the broadcast work. In the UFC and maybe in television in general, the traditionally female roles are reporter and host, and the traditionally male roles are analyst and commentator. And I am the only woman that is consistently a commentator and an analyst. So it's just part of the job. And, you know, I spent 18 years in an MMA gym. The first probably 10 years, there were no women on that I trained with. And I have an older brother, so I'm used to a lot of teasing, and it's fine. I would never want to offend my husband. And I will tell you, he gets a lot of shit online. Excuse my language. He gets a lot of crap online, but he is an unbelievably confident guy who understands the nature of my job and the nature of what it is to be a woman on television in a man's world. And he's a very private guy. So people always wonder, like, why don't you post more about your husband? He hates it. He doesn't want me to. I will occasionally, you know, family vacation pictures and stuff like that, but he's a very, very private guy, and he's happy being that way.
Did you see that what the UFC crew did in response to Chris Weidman's joke, who parodied Shavkat, and they made you cry in the video?
No, that when they had the filter.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
You love me, and you need to prop because you didn't have that prop like an hour ago.
They were doing like pretend prom. We call it a promposal. Do you know what that is?
Not really.
So I'll explain. So in America, in high school, around like grade 11 or 12, so you're like 16, 17 years old, they do a fancy dance at school where everybody gets dressed up, and it's called prom. So that segment on the television show was them pretending to ask me to go to prom with them. And Chris Weidman thought that the best way to get me to say yes would be to make it look like he was Shavkat. So yes, that joke will never get old.
Last time you were in the studio and Belal was sitting around you, he joked that you are on Shavkat's team, so you can pump him with some bad substances. What is your prediction for their upcoming fight in 2025?
Listen, that fight's going to be very difficult for both of them. I think it's going to be the hardest fight of Shavkat's career by far. And I will tell you that I really, really hope that he does not take the fight unless he's healthy, because both Stephen Thompson and Ian Garry, he apparently had pretty significant injuries going into those fights. And it's not just like people sometimes think, well, he didn't look that injured, he was moving around fine. A lot of times the injury affects your preparation and your ability to have your cardio in the right place for a fight. So he has to be healthy. That is the biggest thing I would say. If he's not able to prepare and do all of the running that he needs to do to have, you know, the cardio be on point, to me, his durability and his ability to take the fight and stay dangerous later into rounds, although we don't get to see it very often, is one of his most important weapons. So he has to go into that fight healthy, or it's not going to go well, because Belal has endless cardio and will pressure him almost as hard as he pressures other guys. I'm not going to give you a prediction because I don't know whether I'll be calling that fight or not, and I will get in trouble if I make a prediction on that fight. But I think you know who I will be, you know, hoping ends up as champion. That being said, I am also a huge Belal Muhammad fan, and he and I were kind of joking about it, and he was very nice. I mean, on air, he was being funny about it, but he knows that, like, at the end of the day, I would never root for him to lose. We'll put it that way. Like, I think Belal is an amazing champion and an amazing human being and a wonderful individual. So honestly, win or lose, it's going to be hard and happy at the same time.
What has Dana White and the UFC team say about the popularity of your story, or I don't know, your bromance with Shavkat?
I mean, no one's really said anything about it, but I think that they like it enough where I haven't gotten too much in trouble for it or anything like that. I mean, obviously as commentators, it's tough because it's our job to remain unbiased. But at the same time, when you pick people to analyze the sport who were in the sport, like I have teammates, former teammates that still fight. DC, of course, is always going to have a special connection with Khabib and his fighters. It just is what it is. So, but yeah, no, I think that they have appreciated the level of buzz that it made among the Kazakh fans. I just can't get over your fan base. That's what I can't get over, is like how, and it's so, I've never said this before. It's funny to me how different cultures operate differently on social media, because your fans will comment, like 10 comments from one person over and over and over and over and over again. And, you know, like the flag. Sometimes there'll be 20 comments from the same account. But they don't always necessarily like follow. They just spam the comment section. It's really amazing to see the passion that they have for their athletes, though. Like you don't get that in America, that same level of passion.
And yes, actually, how did your social media like took off from after the invasion of Kazakhstanis? Like the horde of our fans after the chills came to you.
I have to show you. Let me see if I can pull it up. So the first time that this happened was right around the time that I made my commentary debut, or my pay-per-view commentary debut, excuse me. So I did a video that just shows like my journey to Australia, calling the Israel Adesanya fight against Sean Strickland. And I did kind of a reel about my whole trip and like how big of a deal it was for me to call my first pay-per-view fight. It had nothing to do with Kazakhstan. It had nothing to do with Shavkat. There was nothing in there about it. And I went back and I looked, and I had 104,000 comments on a video that didn't even have anything to do with him. And there was another, I have unpinned it now, but there was another picture that happened to be pinned right next to it that also had nothing to do with Shavkat that had like 200. It was so much that my Instagram wasn't functioning right. Because you know how when someone comments, it kind of gives you a little bar across the top? There were so many, I couldn't click on anything. And so I couldn't navigate in my Instagram. I couldn't post anything because it was just days of bing, ding, ding, ding. It was very cool.
There's an opinion about, I should say, opinion of haters that allegedly your sympathy with Shavkat may be a PR story by the UFC.
Really?
Because of the interest of from Kazakhstan fans.
That's funny. I didn't even, is that you saying, do you see that in America or do you see that in Kazakhstan?
In Kazakhstan, yeah, of course.
Really?
In Kazakhstan. Yeah,
no,
it's a pluralism. It's a pluralism. So
yeah, no, I can assure you that that's not the case. If anything, it would be more likely that I would get in trouble, because we're not supposed to, like, as analysts and commentators, it's super important that, you know, if I were to ever call one of his fights, which may happen, it's important that the fans know that I will be fair to him, but I will also be fair to his opponent. And I would be. Like, if Shavkat is not doing well in the fight, I'm going to say he's not doing well in the fight. If that ever happens. So no, honestly, it would be more likely that they would not like it than that they would ever like create this situation, because it's not, it's very important, particularly from my direct boss, that I be as unbiased as possible. Like I said before, they know that we will have connections with certain fighters. Like Jean Anik is very connected to Belal Muhammad. DC is very connected to the Khabib and all of his guys. Every analyst has teammates, so it does happen. But yeah, no, I can promise you that is not the case.
Do you follow any other Kazakh fighters? Maybe on UFC, maybe not from it.
because honestly, because of Shavkat and because of like not just liking him, but like seeing how it's just such a warm culture. Like that was the other thing I'll say. It's not only that the fans are like just commenting. What they say is so warm and inviting. Like the number of times that people have said, you know, please come visit us. We would love to host you. We want to show you who we are as people, and we want to introduce you to the food and what life is really like here. It has caused me to really kind of take notice. Every time I see that flag, it's definitely something that I pay attention to. And I'm not going to say his last name correctly, but Asu in the bantamweight division is another one that, you know, he's obviously getting to the top of that division and is doing really, really well in the UFC.
Yes,
Amabayev, right?
Asu Amabayev, yeah. Right.
But yeah, I was not remember. Yes, yeah.
Could you name us, please, your top favorite fighters in the UFC?
After right now?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Probably. Or maybe in history.
Okay, I get asked this question a lot. I do, of course, I have to put Shavkat at number one. That's just the truth. And I think, gosh, of all time, I'll put John Jones at number two. I will put. This is such a hard question. I'm going to put Zhang Weili at number three. I'm going to put Ronda Rousey at number four. Actually, you know what? I'll put Ronda Rousey at number three, Zhang Weili at number four. And then one more, Max Holloway.
Okay. And finally, did you know that your name is spelled in English exactly the same as the Kazakh name Laura or Laura?
So I will tell you, the only Kazakh word that I can read in Kazakh is my name, because I've learned to identify it from the comment section. And I wouldn't know what those letters are called, but like if I see it, I can tell that someone is using my name. It looks like, to me, it looks like an N, and then there's a Y. Anyway, how do I say thank you in Kazakh?
Rahmet.
Rahmet?
Rahmet, yes.
Rahmet.